How's it going, YouTube? I'm back with another reaction. Today, we're going to be watching the infamous case of the Acid King. It's from a channel called Haunted Autopsy. I'm not going to lie, I saw about like 20 seconds just to see like how the video was, and it kind of creeped me out in the first 20 seconds. So like I already know it's going to be creepy for the whole 30 minutes. So yeah, let's get into this. Don't forget to subscribe. Original video is going to be in the description.
I don't think that you can do. And you don't have to pray like in a church. You just tell them what you want and get it.
The inverted cross. Now this is satanic.
By the way, if you hear like the audio clipping or like the audio, if you hear the audio clipping or like the audio sort of getting distorted, it's just from the video. Don't think that it's like my editing. It's from the actual video.
This is a very generic symbol.
Heavy metal music. The rock show Mission Death Fest 1 is being staged at the Jackson Optimus Sports Arena. It was originally supposed to happen in Detroit, and the switch has some people in Jackson concerned the groups promote satanic worship.
Early in the 1980s, the Satanic Panic had started mainly in the United States and eventually into other countries throughout the late 90s. Some argue that it's still going on to this day. It was a moral panic that started due to rumors spreading across country that people were performing satanic rituals. And during the 80s, American pop culture was obsessed with the occult and satanic imagery, which led to many people believing that magic, heavy metal music, and role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons would infiltrate the minds of the youth, leading them to worship the devil. Some parents believed devil worshippers would roam around the streets looking for human sacrifice, doing drugs, and selling it to kids. The problem is none of these claims were able to be backed up, since there was nothing to prove that these events had ever occurred, until the case of a teenager who went by the name the Acid King.
So this kid's a Satanist. So all this is about Satanism. That's pretty crazy. I never seen a video about this, other than like, what was that one Paranormal Activity? It's like the cult one where they're all in a cult. That's the only thing I've seen like sort of like this.
In the quiet suburbs of New York's Northport community on Long Island, Ricky Kasso was born. He was named after his father, Richard Dick Kasso, who was a well-respected history teacher and football coach at Cold Spring Harbor High School. His mother, Lynn Kasso, was a teacher as well. To avoid any confusion, I will be referring to Ricky's father by his middle name.
Alright, remember guys, Dick is his father, Lynn is his mother. It looks like, or from the basic look of this, his father was a teacher and football coach. His mother was a teacher. They both went to university. It seems like he's had a normal, like, American life. No, from the look of it, no struggle financially, but you never know.
Ricky's parents would later have more children, and Ricky would be the oldest, as he had 3 younger sisters. For some time, Dick and Lynn would describe Ricky to be the greatest kid in the world, and Dick believed his son had a bright future ahead of him. He would describe Ricky as a model child and a young athlete. As a young boy, he would wake up early in the morning to play football with his friends, and occasionally with his father. Though Ricky's bright future would soon start to fade away when he started the 6th grade, he would slowly become rebellious and started to smoke marijuana at the age of 11. And this was just the start of his interest in drugs, devil worship, heavy metal, and the occult.
Honestly, I don't get how people can go from smoking marijuana to smoking other things. Like, maybe I get back in the day, like 80s and 90s, but even today, people say it's a gateway drug. And people say this, people say that. And it's, for certain situations, it's true, because there's a lot of people out there, a lot of youth out there that's not, I guess, not informed, or they just don't care. But they go from smoking marijuana to, like, you know, doing synthetics, to doing DMT, and then that's when they go crazy. But like me personally, I've been smoking, I don't even know, like 5-6 years. Never once did anything more other than marijuana and shrooms. That's the only two I've done. And like honestly, I don't want to try DMT. I don't want to try synthetic. I don't want to try like anything else, crack, heroin, none of that bullshit. Don't want to try none of that.
When Ricky was 13, he befriended a boy by the name of Jimmy Troiano in the 7th grade. The two met at school during football practice. Jimmy was someone who was a promising athlete as well, but was also rebellious just like Ricky. You see, Jimmy had been in juvenile hall before for almost a year and already had experience with using and selling acid. The two hang out quite often, experimenting drugs together. It started out with smoking marijuana to later graduating to stronger drugs like mescaline, LSD, and PCP.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I guess maybe back in the day, because like they didn't know a lot. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have like any of the stuff that we have now. So I guess back in the day they were more susceptible to like doing this other stuff. But like it's just dumb. Like to me personally, and like I don't know because I've never tried it again. But to me personally, just doing that and risking it is dumb.
Eventually the two would begin skipping class and football practice to meet up and do drugs. A classmate of Ricky's remembers him walking into art class and began drawing a dragon where he kept mentioning that the dragon was moving. Though this would just be the beginning. As his use of drugs increased, so did his anger problems. And during a football game, Ricky was ejected for an illegal hit he did on the opposing quarterback, and Ricky's father was angry.
Now I mentioned Ricky would play football as a kid, but Jimmy stated that Ricky hated football. He says it's because Ricky never liked the sport at all, and always made comments saying, "I hate this sport, I hate this game." Jimmy also added that Ricky only played football because his father would force him to.
Over the years, the two would continue to use drugs and get high together. Ricky eventually stopped caring about school and football and would ultimately drop out of high school when he turned 16. Ricky became well known for not only his use of hallucinogenic drugs, but selling them as well. Because of his reputation, the younger teens had looked up to him because he was always in possession of acid, and depending on his mood, he would allow these young teens to take a hit of his drugs for free. This is when he would begin to call himself the Acid King.
Damn, so he really let the power go to his head of being the local acid dealer. That he named himself the king.
Would start obsessing over the idea of devil worship and the occult. His former classmates have stated that Ricky would hang out a lot at cemeteries where he would smoke 10 bags of PCP so that he can get in touch with the devil himself and chant, "Satan, Satan, Satan." According to someone, they stated the following. Ricky was of the devil. When he was on acid, he'd go back into the dark woods, up in Aztecia, and he would talk to the devil. He said the devil came in the form of a tree, which sprouted out of the ground and glowed. And when he tried questioning Ricky about it, Ricky simply responded that he didn't like talking about it as people thought he was nuts. Ricky would show up at a library, picking up books on Satanism, wanting to learn more on the subject. Jimmy had said there were occasions where he'd be walking down the street and hear Ricky yelling out, "Hell Satan."
I mean, you could say a lot of things about him. Like him being dumb, him being evil, him being maniacal, whatever you want to say. But you have to say he was devoted. Like, that dude's crazy. That dude's insane. He did all that, but he was still reading about Satan and stuff.
When walking by certain places. His obsession with Satanism didn't come from reading books like the Satanic Bible, which he had expressed interest in, or people who claimed to be Satanist. Instead, it came from his love of rock and roll and heavy metal music. A former classmate had mentioned that he would begin to notice a change in Ricky's appearance, from having short hair and always smiling to having long hair and always wearing concert t-shirts. One of the popular spots Ricky and his friends would hang out a lot was the gazebo in the park down by the waterfront. Ricky's behavior would get worse and there was no sign of him getting any better. It was unbearable to his parents. Ricky's father had made a statement about his son's behavior saying, he became insubordinate to his teachers, then joined in a house burglary and began to get in trouble with the police. Ricky had told his father, "I enjoy the fantasy world of drugs. You can't stop me. I love drugs." He would scare his parents when they found out that he would write songs about Satan and would openly talk about his drug deals. He'll say things like, "Mom, I'm going down to get a few hits of meth. I'll be back for dinner." He even told his mother that suicide is the ultimate high. He even went as far to put ketchup on his arm and call his mother, yelling at her, "See what you made me do." And as her mother runs to check on Ricky, he would laugh when she sighs in relief when she realizes that it's not blood. They would often kick him out of the house whenever they were fed up with their son's behavior. Ricky would then occasionally live on the streets, cars, local woods, garages, backyards, and houses of friends. Ricky would discuss with a friend that he wanted to start a cult and eventually would create a loosely organized cult that referred to themselves as the Knights of the Black Circle.
The Knights of the Black Circle. I mean, it's not a bad name. It's pretty cool. But like, it's a cult. Come on, man.
The cult had 4 members: Ricky, Jimmy, Albert Quinones, and Gary Lauwers. A local by the name of Dan Carson stated, "They used to take animals down here and cut them up, burn them, and stuff like that."
See, this right here is truly vile, evil, and like just disgusting. Like, what choices do animals have? They can't talk, they can't like do anything, you can't understand them. So for you to catch them, torture them basically, because that's what they're doing, they were just torturing them. That's like one of the most evil things you could do. One of them.
He goes on to say that he believes that Ricky was the biggest influence in the group. The younger teens who looked up to Ricky would go to his shack where he would ramble on about Satanism, but the kids didn't care about any of that. They really only looked for him because he was the only one who sold acid very cheap. His whole obsession with Satanism was irrelevant to them. Since Ricky wasn't living at home, he never reached out to his parents except for 2 reasons.
Money.
1, he was in trouble with the law, or 2, he was extremely ill. In the late fall of 1983, when Ricky was 16, he got arrested for digging into a colonial-era grave to steal a skull to be used in some sort of ritual. He was held in jail for a day or 2 and was then released. He wouldn't be charged until the following year in April. And at this time, Jimmy was arrested for burglary and was sentenced to 8 months. Ricky's parents had tried to help him and sent their son to a drug rehab program at South Oaks Hospital, but to no avail. According to a local, he had talked to Ricky shortly after being released from the hospital. He says that Ricky got out by bullshitting the doctors. When he went in, they believed he worshipped Satan and shit. And he told doctors that he was fine, that he was gonna go back to school and doesn't believe in Satan anymore. And he bullshit the doctors so much they finally believed him and they let him go. Another local has said that he ran away from the hospital. When she saw him at the train station, she noticed Ricky's hair was now red to avoid being found. She asked Ricky, "What's going on?" And he goes, "No way are they gonna lock me up. I'm not crazy." I was like, "I never said you were crazy, but maybe you need help with drugs." He said, "I do not." And then he started yelling, coming closer. I talked my way out of it. I think Ricky stopped living in 8th grade. In April of 1984, Ricky had a court hearing, so he would go back to his home where he would shower. His father wasn't thrilled seeing his son there, but he was nice enough to still drive Ricky to court. After the hearing, Ricky was dropped off near a convenience store where he would ask his father for some money. His father declined and Ricky would kick his car, leaving a dent on the passenger side door. And this is when Dick had disowned his son and banned Ricky from his home. He told Ricky to never come back nor to ever contact him or his family. With this, Ricky's use of drugs would only further increase.
He and I were best friends.
Damn. So his father was just like, "I'm done with you." Cut him off from the family. As he's leaving, Ricky, boom, kicks his door, breaks his car, and then boom, more drugs. So here we are, chapter 3, betrayal.
Okay, best friends.
I'm guessing Ricky's gonna kill his
Always
dad
there for him.
or his mom.
Always back.
Ricky, Gary, and several other friends of theirs attended a party in the woods late at night. Ricky, being the acid king, had brought PCP with them. As the party went on, Ricky would eventually pass out from getting extremely high. As Ricky was passed out, his friend Gary wanted more PCP. So as Ricky was still unconscious, Gary stole 10 packets of PCP out of Ricky's pockets. When everyone woke up the next morning, someone informed Ricky that they saw Gary stealing the rest of his PCP while he was asleep. Ricky became furious and confronted Gary, demanding he either gives his drugs back or pays them back. Gary refused that he had stolen any drugs from Ricky, but Ricky didn't believe him, so he had beaten him to a pulp. Gary would give Ricky back 5 packets of PCP. Since Gary only returned 5 out of the 10 he stole, this meant he owed Ricky $50.
I mean, what can you do? in Ricky's situation? Like, you're just gonna let people keep stealing from you? I don't know. But like, he wouldn't have been in this situation if he wouldn't have made the choices from before. You see? Consequences.
And Gary promised he would borrow the money he owed from his parents to pay him back. But Gary wouldn't keep his promise, and Ricky wasn't going to let this go. For the next few days, Ricky would continue to beat up Gary. The problem was that Ricky didn't even care about getting his money or drugs back. To him, this was all just to prove a point. Locals have said that Gary was afraid of Ricky and always seen getting chewed up and constantly getting his ass kicked. In one instance, someone saw Gary come out from behind a church. His jacket was ripped, cuts on one side of his face with blood dripping down. Another stated that she fixed his wounds up one time, his black eye and bloody nose. And Gary would tell her that Ricky was an asshole and that he...
Damn, he must have been a menace, like for real. Or I guess just because he was all drugged up, he couldn't feel anything. He just kept going. But like, actually, I guess that's probably what it was. Like, he was probably just drugged up and just like a superhero.
He bought a knife to protect himself because Ricky had told Gary that next time he was going to do more and it won't just be a black eye. A month later, Ricky was starting to get sick as he had pneumonia, so he went back to the home of his parents and asked for help. Despite what his father said of never coming back, Ricky's parents couldn't resist seeing their child in pain, so Ricky was sent to the Long Island Jewish Hospital. While Ricky remained in there, his parents wanted to have him institutionalized. They explained to the doctors about the grave digging incident, his daily use of PCP and other hallucinogens, suicide attempts/jokes, and his threatening behaviors. But the psychiatrist didn't believe there was anything wrong with him. They said Ricky was antisocial, but was neither psychotic nor dangerous, so they let him go. Now that Ricky was back out again, he was still not done with Gary.
I love you.
Oh, I'm not saying that. That's evil. Dang. Chapter 4.
You love me?
On June 19, Jimmy was released from jail after serving 8 months. He met up with Ricky and Albert. The three were planning to go to the Aztecia Woods to get high. But what confused both Jimmy and Albert was when Ricky decided to invite Gary along. They believed maybe Ricky had finally let go of the whole drug incident. The four headed their way deep into the secluded woods at 8 p.m. They made a fire and according to Jimmy, they took somewhere between 30 to 40 hits of PCP and LSD altogether.
I'm only a weed smoker, but that sounds like a lot for those synthetics. That sounds like a stupid amount that's gonna get you like feeling like you're an alien from the third dimension. I mean from the fucking seventh dimension.
As I was saying, drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
That's too much. They're crazy.
Now, these four have hung out in the woods at night before, but this night though was a bit different than the others.
Oh, my bad. I want to say one thing. They all got the same hair. That's all I gotta say.
These four have hung out in the woods at night before, but this night though was a bit different than the others. Reason was there were 3 crows that would circle around right above the teenagers' campfire. Ricky noticed this and keep this in mind as it will be important later on. As the night went on, the fire would slowly die out, so Ricky would suggest using Gary's jacket as a kindling. Gary would refuse to throw his entire jacket into the fire, but agreed to cut off and use his sleeves, and later his socks. As the fire started to die out again, Ricky suggests to cut Gary's hair to keep the fire alive. Gary would refuse, but Ricky didn't listen. He didn't want to hear a no from Gary, so Ricky got up and Jimmy held Gary down. Ricky cut out clumps of Gary's hair using the pocket knife he carried. Once cutting it, he threw it onto the fire and Gary said, "I'm getting bad vibes that you want to hurt me." Ricky replied, "Hurt you? I don't want to hurt you. I want to kill you." Ricky immediately pounced on Gary and bit him on the neck, then proceeded to stab him somewhere between 17 to 36 times.
Bro, oh, I keep forgetting, or I keep like undervaluing the superhero powers that they get whenever they do these drugs. Like his mind just went into like a psychopathic frenzy. He just straight bit his neck and started stabbing him.
During the stabbing, Ricky had shouted to Gary, "Say you love Satan," and Gary wouldn't comply to his request. Instead, he would shout back, "I love my mother." Each stab, Ricky would tell him to say it, but Gary never does. Once Gary was dead, Ricky would gouge out his eyes. Some people believe Ricky had gouged his eyes as some sort of satanic ritual, and Ricky had said that the crows above cawed. He believed Satan manifested as a crow, and the call was a sign that the devil was pleased of his doing. And where was Jimmy and Albert during all of this? Well, we don't really know. You'll see why. For 2 days, nobody knew about the murder of Gary for 2 reasons. One, his body was deep into the secluded woods, so the chances of him being found were slim. And 2, he was a frequent runaway, so nobody really questioned about his whereabouts. But good old Ricky couldn't keep this to himself. He would later start bragging to his friends that he killed Gary as a sacrifice to Satan. And Jimmy would tell him to stay quiet about it as he just wants to forget about it and move on.
Today, like, you know, everyone's saying, like, everyone tells on themselves, they put everything on the internet. I don't know if y'all have heard of the Young Thug and Gunna case, how they just got locked up for RICO charges. Like, I guess they were doing it back in the day too. Everyone was just snitching on themselves because they just said that everyone thought that he was just running away or whatever. But what's his name? Fucking Ricky was over here talking about it. So probably actually I'm lying. His friends probably told too. But still, like, he probably told the majority of people, I killed him and it was for Satan. That's probably what he did. It's just a recurring theme through all history that people telling themselves.
Sacrifice to Satan. And Jimmy would tell him to stay quiet about it as he just wants to forget about it and move on. But Ricky didn't listen. According to a local by the name of Rich, he says he saw Ricky one night, and Ricky told him that he killed Gary, but Rich didn't believe him. The next night, Rich decides to see the supposed dead body because he thought Ricky was bullshitting as usual. As they head into the woods, he tells Ricky, "Rick, what the hell did you kill? A fucking cat?" And then Ricky points and says, "There it is." Rich finally saw Gary's lifeless body covered with a thick pile of maggots and leaves on top. Rich turned around and quickly ran off. He says Ricky seemed calm about the whole thing. As he meets with him back at the park, Ricky tells him, "See, I told you." And when asked why he did it, he responds with, "For kicks." For 2 weeks since the brutal killing, Ricky would continue to brag and show his friends Gary's body. But as days went by, both Jimmy and Ricky's paranoia would slowly increase. They returned back into the woods to move Gary's body in a shallow grave. His body was badly decomposed, and as they tried to move him, Gary's head came off. Afterwards, the thrill of the murder would start to fade for Ricky, and he was back to being bored. Jimmy and Ricky would leave Northport and planned a road trip to head to California. They planned on making a career by selling drugs. The next day on July 1st, a 16-year-old girl would call the police to report of Gary's body, but the officer who answered the call didn't see anyone by the name of Gary being reported missing. When the officer asked what the girl's name was, she quickly hung up. The officer simply dismissed it as some prank call. At this point, Ricky and Jimmy were 160 miles away from their hometown before they needed more money to be able to progress their road trip. And they sold some mescaline and bought a junker car for $50. Back in Northport, on July 4th, 3 days after the call, the police decided to go to the woods to look for Gary, as they were confirmed by his mother that she hasn't seen Gary in a while. She even stated that she once got a phone call by someone with this eerie voice saying, "You'll never see your son again because I just killed him." Police
Really? Let me hear that one more time.
Hasn't seen Gary in a while. She even stated that she once got a phone call by someone with this eerie voice saying, "You'll never see your son again because I just killed him."
I believe it. Everything else they're saying about Ricky, whatever his name is, everything else they're saying is saying that, like, he's stupid, he's crazy, and just drugged up. And him saying this is totally believable. He probably did that like the first night. Oh, my bad. He probably did that the first night. He called her. He couldn't wait to call her. "I just killed him." And then he told his friends, "Yeah, I told his mom that I killed him too." This dude is crazy.
Police used 4 canines and eventually found a pile of bones, a denim vest, pants, and a pair of shoes. Since his body was out in the woods for a little over 2 weeks, his body had been completely drained of blood and his face was practically gone. As police discovered what was left of Gary, Ricky and Jimmy decided to drive back home to party with their friends on 4th of July. The two partied, got high on acid, and eventually both would sleep in their vehicle. The next morning, police got a call of a suspicious vehicle. When an officer arrived, he noticed it was both Jimmy and Ricky asleep in their vehicle, so the officer called for backup since they were considered as highly dangerous. Backup arrived and arrested the 2 teenagers. They were still sluggish as they were still high from the drugs, but as they started to sober up, Ricky went back to his old cocky ways.
So yeah, the other one's Jimmy. Wait, so how old are they right here? They're like 19, 18? Bro, my cat's
Ricky
on my
first
mouse
told
right now.
police that he didn't know anything about the killing and that he hasn't seen Gary in some time. But later, Ricky would confess to the murder, and the chief who interviewed him said he sounded so proud of what he had done, stating he got what he deserved.
Bro, this... I guess whoever made this video, Autopsy, he's trying to emphasize that this dude was just over drugged up and cocky. But that's just crazy. He just confessed to the detective, like, in that manner. That's insane.
And that he hasn't seen Gary in some time. But later, Ricky would confess to the murder, and the chief who interviewed him said he sounded so proud of what he had done, stating he got what he deserved. Ricky would sign a confess statement that he did the killing and Jimmy played no role into the murder.
He looks tall as fuck.
At least, that's what he told Jimmy. Because in reality, Ricky was lying. He actually told police this: "I was holding him on the ground and Jimmy kicked him in the ribs. I looked up at Jimmy and Jimmy indicated to cut his throat. I then took out my knife and stabbed Gary. The knife went all the way in. Somehow, he got away and ran through the woods. I caught him and brought him back to where the fire was. I dropped my knife when I chased him, and Jimmy Troiano found it and gave me the knife, and I stabbed Gary in the back a whole bunch of times. Me and Troiano dragged Gary back in the woods. We started covering him with leaves and he sat up. I bugged out, started to stab him in the face. I didn't count how many times. I'm not really sure. I don't know what I said, but I said a whole bunch of satanic things."
This should have been called betrayal. What the fuck? He just backstabbed Troiano, Jimmy. He just backstabbed him so hard, bro. I told him I took the fall for it. I told him it was just me, because it was just him. I think from the story that they're telling, it was just Ricky. But he's telling the detective all of this. That's insane.
Now, this story went everywhere, and as you can imagine, the public were frightened, especially because of this murder linking to Satanism. But police didn't call this case satanic, but rather a drug-related murder. Ricky had seen himself on the news that night, and everyone in jail knew what Ricky was in there for. Jimmy says Ricky was starting to feel scared because he didn't know what the inmates might feel about him killing in the name of Satan. And Gary's dad talked to the news wanting to distance his son from Satanism.
My son was not involved in any drugs, and he was fearful of this kid, Ricky Castle, because he had been acquainted with him maybe at a previous occasion from school, and apparently also after school. So he was fearful of him, and it is my belief that he was abducted, that they were just waiting for him. They saw my son as their victim that they needed, and abducted him somehow or other.
As the night went on, Ricky started to feel pressured, and within less than 48 hours, Ricky grabbed his bedsheet and hung himself, leaving his friend Jimmy all by himself.
What? Change member, okay. Devil worshipping cult hanged himself in his jail cell early yesterday after being arraigned on charges of killing a 17-year-old youth in a grisly sacrificial slaughter. On twice hourly rounds at the county jail. Let's see. Richard Castle hanging by a bedsheet in his cell at 1 a.m.
This now meant that Ricky's statement was useless and inadmissible. Albert had agreed to testify against Jimmy in return for immunity. Jimmy had signed 2 confessions that he later recanted. People thought this would be an open and shut case, but there was just one big problem.
Eyes were cut out in what county police say was a satanic ritualistic about a devil-worshipping cult of teenagers.
Jimmy's attorney, Eric Nyberg, talked to Jimmy asking his version of what had happened. He told Eric a strong, convincing story, They arranged another meeting and asked Jimmy again his version of the story. Again, Eric says it was a strong, believable story. And the problem? It was different than the first one, and he did it again a third time. So Eric decided to take him back to the scene of the crime, and again, a different yet very believable story. Eric calls him out on it and asks why is he constantly changing his story. Jimmy replied, "Mr. Nyberg, when the trees are melting and the stars are racing across the sky, it's hard to remember what happened." This is when Eric had a plan and knew how to win this case. The trial would begin a year later. In court, prosecutors brought Albert on stand and made him tell his side of the story. Albert's version was that Jimmy was the one who held Gary down while Ricky repeatedly stabbed him, and this was supported by medical examiners.
Something like 22 stabbing or cutting type wounds going up and down the back. The skull injuries were in the facial area, something like 7 or 8 wounds there. One was a little lower down just above the upper teeth, but mostly they were in the region of the left eye. This pattern of wounds certainly would be what you'd expect if someone were being held immobile and then someone else were doing the stabbing who's right there just going up and down.
But of course, this is when the big problem takes place. Albert admitted to taking at least 10 hits of LSD prior to the killing, so this begs the question, is his testimony even reliable?
That's what I was thinking the whole time, cause like you can't be a witness if you're on drugs.
If Jimmy can barely remember what had happened, how is Albert any different if he was just as high as the rest? To be able to prove this, Albert admitted to police that he saw a lion in the woods that night, so in court, Eric asked him if he saw a lion that night, to which Albert responded, he did not.
Damn.
Eric tells him, "But didn't you hear? There was a circus in town and a lion escaped." And Albert says, "You mean the lion was really there?" This completely...
So now they can't tell if he knows what's the difference between reality and hallucination.
Destroyed Albert's credibility, and it continues to get worse. On cross-examination for the first time, Albert admitted that prior to the attack, he had taken part in attacking Gary by kicking and punching him along with Ricky and Jimmy, and Albert would then recant his statement and said he was positive Jimmy never held Gary down. Eric would now make his closing statement to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, I humbly and respectfully submit that only God Almighty knows or will ever know what happened that night. If Jimmy Troiano or Albert Quinones deserve to be punished, it is the Almighty to make that decision." 3 days later, the jury returned with a verdict. Jimmy Troiano was found not guilty for second-degree murder.
Wait, that for real? Dang. If that's the truth, then W. I thought he'll be found guilty for sure.
Threats have forced them to post guards at the homes of 5 community residents as a grand jury continues.
Once it was all over, the media were going after rock and metal bands like Alice Cooper, Judas Priest, and AC/DC, and my biggest guess is because these were commonly known as Ricky's favorite bands. After all, he was wearing an AC/DC shirt the day of his arrest. They also blamed role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. People in Northport were worried that the killing would leave a bad reputation, but after many years, it was calm, quiet, and nothing like this ever happened again. Of course, this didn't stop people from believing devil worshippers were out.
Wait, was that his name? Dark Lord
Blood?
Again.
Of course.
Dark Lord Blood, satanic worshipper.
This didn't stop people from believing devil worshippers were out there, spreading the words of evil.
Also being sold for healthy reasons. Man, what's healthy about selling a knife to this?
You just growl at him? Oh, bro, he wants to smoke. This interviewer wants to smoke. I'm with it. But like, this dude just growled at him. Like, what the fuck? He's a furry?
Vicky!
I don't know whatever happened with Albert after all these years, but Jimmy would appear in a documentary about Ricky Castle titled Satan in the Suburbs that was released in the year 2000. There's an interview with Jimmy as well. Jimmy says he never really was pissed at Ricky after his death. He was mostly angry that he got himself in this mess. He also apologizes to Gary's parents and wished he was sober that night. I read a comment that Ricky's father had died of Lyme disease in the early 90s. Another that said Ricky's father was a piece of shit. But a crazy thing did happen with Jimmy. On October 9, 2004, he was arrested for robbing CVS Pharmacy, trying to get Oxycontin and fentanyl patches. He left a note to someone behind the cash register saying this.
The note read, "Okay, give me all of that. I have a gun. I will kill you. I will use it. I will slaughter you for Satan."
He was sentenced to 12.5 years. Last thing I could find was a comment saying he's happily married now.
Wait, what the fuck? I'm so confused. So was that him? James Troiano. Yeah. How the fuck is he?
Last thing I could find was a comment saying he's happily married now. In that same interview, Jimmy was asked what he would tell Ricky if he was here right now.
Hope you said your prayers before you hung up.
That's crazy. That's a good ass one-liner.
It's been 37 years since the murder of Gary Lauwers, and this case is still talked about a lot, but I barely find any YouTube videos on it. There was a documentary on this case that was released back in 2019, however it's unavailable. You can watch Satan in the Suburbs here on YouTube. I'll leave a link to the playlist down below, as well as the interview with Jimmy. There's a film based on this case titled Ricky 6, which is also available here on YouTube. I'll link that as well.
So like Nicky 6?
It's unfortunate we will most likely never know what really happened that night. Both of the surviving teenagers couldn't keep their story straight, and the one who confessed to the crime is gone. So, maybe Eric is right. Maybe only God will ever know what really happened.
I thought that was the end. I'm gonna lower the volume right here. This is extremely loud right here.
It wasn't a cult. There was just a group of kids that came down here that, you know, were basically castaways, and they gave this town a bad name.
They said they had bonfires and they held satanic rituals around. That wasn't true.
I don't believe there was a cult. There was 2 or 3 people who walked around with satanic literature, who said or professed a belief in Satan, who said they practiced satanic worship.
A drifter and a drug user and dealer. He had a fascination with the devil. He worshipped the devil.
That was the infamous case of the Acid King. That was a really good video, honestly. I liked how it was produced and put together. That dude was crazy. He was just drugged up and cocky and I don't know. But my favorite part of the video was the one-liner, of course. Anyways, that's it for the video. If y'all liked it, don't forget to leave a like. I'm gonna leave a link to the original video in the description, so if you want to see the original video, go over there and check it out. And thank y'all for watching. Have a good day.